Welcome to the Chopin channel. I'm Roberto Poli. By 1844, Chopin's relationship with Maurice Schlesinger, the Parisian publisher who had issued nearly all his works since 1832, had cooled. The reasons remain unclear, but that year Schlesinger declined to publish both the Berceuse Opus 57 and the Sonata in B minor Opus 58. The manuscripts were instead accepted by Meissonier, another Paris-based publisher. By 1846, Chopin had entered into a new publishing arrangement with Louis Barandou, who had acquired the Schlesinger firm when Maurice Schlesinger retired. Every work Chopin completed after 1845 then appeared under the Barandou imprint. When the facsimile of the manuscript of the Barcarolle, which Chopin delivered to Barandou in 1846, arrived at my doorstep, I was thrilled. I always experience a particular joy in seeing Chopin's handwriting, and observing the compositional process of a piece that has accompanied me intimately for nearly 3 decades is even more compelling. I immediately compared the manuscript with the 1846 first edition and was surprised by the extent of misinterpretation in the translation from the manuscript to the final printed version. The manuscript prepared by a composer for publication is technically referred to as Stichvorlage, the German term for engraving template. This is the score that the engraver used to produce the printing plates, and it is crucial because it often reflected the composer's last known intentions before the work entered the public domain in printed form. Of course, further layers of editorial work occurred, and we know that Chopin's process of revision often continued after the preparation of the proof sheets, and sometimes even after publication, with slight implementations made in his students' scores. I think it's important to clearly define what the manuscripts we view online or in archives actually represent, because often it is not fully understood that when we see a manuscript prepared by Chopin, for example, that document was created specifically for the engraver at a publishing firm to create the proof sheets for the composition, not for his own private reference or use. In fact, Chopin typically did not retain a personal copy of a newly composed work. Therefore, when we encounter a manuscript in Chopin's handwriting, it is likely the very copy that he prepared to be sent to his publisher. The survival of such documents is due entirely to the archival practices of the publishing houses. Conversely, when manuscripts are missing, it is most likely because they were systematically discarded by the publishers once their practical function had been fulfilled. But let's return to the manuscript of the Barcarolle. When I received it, I began to notice how some dynamic markings were displaced, and even some of the asterisks indicating pedal releases were inaccurately rendered. Of course, it's possible that some of these alterations reflect Chopin's own revisions during the proofreading of the engraved plates. That's hard to establish. Comparing these two original sources opens up intriguing possibilities in that regard. But this video is not about the differences between the manuscript and the first edition of the Barcarolle. What fascinated me most was the glimpse into early melodic and harmonic ideas, some solutions that Chopin ultimately abandoned in favor of the version that we know today. The Barandou Stichvorlage of the Barcarolle reveals several such instances. It is particularly striking to see the evolution of the melodic line and the section marked sfogato in measure 78. Even at a late stage, Chopin appears to have been uncertain about the precise design and character of this passage. The folio containing this passage offers a rare and, I would say, intimate view into his creative mind, and it documents his struggle to arrive at a satisfactory solution. Attempting a reconstruction of what Chopin tried meticulously to conceal under the thick corrections in the Stichvorlage is not always an easy task. Some of the deletions are superficial enough to allow glimpses of earlier versions. Others have been so carefully erased that the original ideas have become permanently unintelligible. In some cases, the reconstruction is possible through deductive reasoning, though inevitably imaginative guesswork must also come into play. In the measures we just looked at, the deletions suggest that Chopin initially conceived a highly chromatic passage for the right hand. Through a series of alterations and an overall process of simplification, he eventually condensed the opening lyrical gesture to just 10 notes. While the extensive erasures prevent us from clearly identifying intermediate stages, we can infer that the irregular group marked with the number 10 was gradually modified from a larger gesture involving as many as 14 notes, and seemingly in the very process of notating the group. In fact, the removal of the line that originally grouped these notes into 16th notes supports the idea that a longer figure comprising more than 12 16th notes was initially intended. Perhaps due to the predominantly diatonic context of the passage, including measure 78, Chopin ultimately reconsidered and scaled back the chromatic elements he had first imagined. This shows an editing process that was still fully active as Chopin was completing the Stichvorlage. In fact, as we leaf through the manuscript, we notice how corrections become increasingly frequent as the piece progresses, culminating in the final page, where we witness much of the correcting work. Of all the amendments applied to the Brandau Stichvorlage of the Barcarolle, one of the most significant ones is found in measure 27, when the main theme, now fashioning double notes and trills, returns shortly before the modulation to A major that leads to the middle section. Here is the correction applied by Chopin to measure 27. The version known today was notated above the deletion in the upper staff. Unlike measure 78, here, fortunately, the erasure is superficial enough to decipher Chopin's original thought. I find this gesture absolutely delightful and possibly even better than the final version. It's a solution of such beauty that I have implemented it in my own performances of the Barcarolle. I wondered why Chopin ultimately rejected this luscious, spiraling descent. After playing the measure a few times and enjoying how exquisite it is, it occurred to me that Chopin eventually used a very similar sequence of pitches in the recapitulation as a variant in simple eighth notes when the theme returns in an orchestrated fashion that features octaves in the left hand and a rich doubling of voices in the right hand. However, I wonder whether there might have been a further reason for reconsidering its inclusion. In truth, the passage would have melodically resembled one of the most beautiful passages of the Berceuse, opus 57. Could we then say that Chopin concealed this momentary self quoting, perhaps unconscious at first, to avoid the obvious similarity with the passage from the Berceuse, a piece that had appeared in print only weeks before he sent the manuscripts of the Barcarolle to his publishers?